Good evening or good morning, depending on when you're listening to me. You're listening to Ben Vidgen on the Deadline Report, Fresh FM. You can obviously listen to me on Sundays afternoons at 1 p.m. or Wednesday 9 p.m. on Fresh FM Live every second weekend. Go to their podcast or go to my website, which is simply postmanproductions.com, and you can just basically do the Google that and type in my words, my name Ben Vidgen, you should be able to find me. So I've been asked for some time now to do an election special, and I have been putting this off, because basically doing elections is a little bit like reading tea leaves. It's very everyone makes predictions, they really ever come correctly. However, what I've also been trying to do is I've been waiting off, because I wanted to get the latest poll and kind of get the lay of the land. And unfortunately, that's actually been much difficult because normally in past elections you find that polls occur, every bloody second week. This hasn't been the case. The polls have been very sparse, and the ones that have come out haven't necessarily been widely promoted. And it's quite intriguing, and we'll get into all these things because this election's actually a very spy and cloak and dagger, dirty politics kind of special. So, at the moment, those polls are very simple. You've got Labour, depending on the variations of the polls, which depending on which uses materials which are landline based technologies, and they're picking up the phone and calling you, or those are using online, which all reach different demographics. You have a basically a following which says that Labour will get between 48 to 52 seats. Short version is Labour is definitely going to be like short of some miraculous miracle or skullduggery. Labour is very likely 90% probable to be running the next government and putting forward their Prime Minister. You've got National sitting around on a distant, dark, distly 28 to 30%. So the best that they can do is pull a white rabbit out of the hat and form a coalition government. We'll get into that as well. And then you've got ACT sitting at 6% steadily across all the polls. Very intriguing because this is actually the best they've done since 2003. And I suspect they might even do a little bit better than people actually think. Everyone tends to forget that the 2 weeks before the actual elections, the swing voters come actually out, people make up their mind, and effectively you get this radicalisation or reactionarism, so that if the government is in power, they always end up losing about 2% instantaneously, and the opposite end of the spectrum always actually picks it up. So ACT very much represents that. Also some very interesting things going down because you've got suburbs like Epsom, which actually represents the fastest growing demographic between people that jointly vote Green and ACT. I know, you think what a strange combination, but there you have it. All those wealthy housewives. And that'll be an electoral vote for the party, will probably ACT in this case, as housewives get under COVID get more concerned about their own livelihoods and less about the planet. And you get party vote, which has traditionally been Green. But again, there's some interesting things going on there. In fact, poor old Greens, we probably won't get to dig into them as the intrigue as much because they're kind of important, but not as much as the rest of stuff. Then you got dun 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 Winston Peters, the Grey Fox. Grey Fox pretty much all is up to skullduggery, and we'll get into that as quick as possible. But let's move along because we have to make sure that we keep this very confined. Okay, so a National won't govern. I don't think they will want. They want to govern. I think they see this as a poison chalice. I think they recognise that the next government in power is going to have all sorts of problems, and I think also their long-term game plan is very much like what happened with Don Brash prior to John Key. The party strategist said, we're going to bow to this one, we're going to lose one to win two. And I think that's what they're going for. I think, in fact, that there's even been a concentrated meeting of this. Take you back to 2017 when Obama flew into the country, had a special meeting by the same people that organised the TPA, organised a special meeting from Auckland. All the top executives were invited to it. Interestingly enough, Jacinda wasn't. She was got to meet Obama, but she wasn't invited to the big boys' table. Shane Jones and all the New Zealand First people, but the Prime Minister wasn't. And at that meeting, I think it was 2 minutes, 3 minutes, the National declared their intention, which the worst kept secret in politics is that they're looking at 2023 Chris Luxon, who's going to do a John Key. Effectively, this election they're going to use to put him into a safe seat. He'll get just like they did. So they did the same thing that happened with Jacinda. Lots of similarities between National and Labour when we actually look at the strategies that employed. And yes, Chris Luxon will come in 2023, and a lot of the infrastructure for what they've got, the bigger boys behind the corporate lobbyists, the people that back the local government New Zealand initiative, they've already got a game plan, and this fits in with the game plan quite nicely. So Judith, enjoy your 5 minutes because you're going to be like Don Brash's Nuclear Free, gone and by lunchtime. But come this after selection, I think, and then it's March of the Purge, and there's some very, very interesting things going on there because, you voted National somehow miraculously did win. You get National would do the traditional things. They would privatise, they'd sell off port assets, they'd spend money on defence. They get very buddy with the Americans. They get into Five Eyes. But there's also this paradox with China, and that you start to look at the current Serious Fraud Office, who normally never goes after anyone of importance. This time around, they're going around doing investigations left, right, and centre. I think 4 of the 8 major cases are actually focusing on the national elections, which are linked to Chinese election donation money. And that, of course, includes the ones that involve tied up with Simon Bridges and Jamie Lee Ross of Advance. And we'll get into Jamie Lee Ross and Advance and how he's not quite what he makes out to be shortly. Of course, you got Zhang Yang, who was also a member of the National Party, works basically identified as former member of or affiliated with Chinese intelligence. All the corporate media is very, very, very big about this, and they go make a big deal about it. And even got people like Martin Bradbury going, "Oh my God, vote National, vote China," because apparently if you're a Labour socialist, it's okay to bash China now, which is again another interesting kind of trying to get into that as quickly as possible. And of course, the other thing was, of course, that Bridge was, and I think Ross was even involved there, and definitely Jerry Brownlee, Judith's 2IC or Batman, were involved in that big trip to China where they met up with the head of the Chinese secret police, and that was done in a way where MFAT, which is the official part of the government, were kept out of the loop, so the National Party or these group of people didn't want them to know what was going on. So it pretty much looks like at the moment that they are Nationals cleaning out all of its people that have got links to China, because of course when you look at this, you've got John Key sitting right up there, who's probably more close to America, but he was the one that brought the Chinese into New Zealand and allowed them to set up their banks here, which of course was wonderful for their laundering operations. You've got Jenny Shipley, previously former Prime Minister as well, who went off and got herself into trouble because of Main Zealand and her Chinese connections. You've got, of course, Judith Collins, and that's Oruvdia, which I can never pronounce, Orvaid. It's all this dodgy curry going off to Chinese, which means there's no curry left in New Zealand, because basically all these big curry people been selling off the swamp curry to China, and Judith Collins' family was, family connections all tied in this. So it's very much a Chinese connection. And as I mentioned, Jerry Brown also tied into that whole China club. What is the thing? John Key, Jenny Shipley, Judith Collins, Jerry Brown, it's the JJJs. So yeah, that's where we'll hold it for the moment. Basically, Nationals out, and that basically means that we're also shifting away from China because there's connections. I think it's a time to take a good break, and I think appropriately now we're going to play Shh, My Little China Girl, David Bowie, and you're on Fresh FM, The Deadline Report with Ben Vidgen, and I'll be back in just a tad.